Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the webinar, Canada, South Africa Astronomy and the SKAO Strategic Research Partnerships. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that while we are meeting virtually, we're all joining from various traditional territories across Turtle Island. The city of Kitchener, Ontario, where I am joining from today, is situated on the traditional territory of the Chinokton, the Anishinaabe, and the Haudenosaunee peoples. We recognize our responsibility to act as stewards for the land and honor the original caretakers who came before us. We recognize the enduring presence and resilience of the Indigenous people across Canada and are grateful for the opportunity to gather and share knowledge on these lands. I invite our attendees to share their own land acknowledgements in the chat as we get started. Before we dive into our discussion, we have an exciting update regarding accessibility. Today, we are testing simultaneous interpretation through the Worldly app right here on Zoom. How to participate for the audience, for captions, you should see an option on your screen to enable the Worldly app. You can select your preferred language to see a live transcript of our conversation. For audio, we're dropping a special link in the chat right now. If you open that link in a separate browser tab or on your mobile device, you'll be able to listen to the live audio in either English or French. When using the web link for audio, please mute the main Zoom window to avoid hearing two voices at once. That is the original speaker and the interpretation. Since we are piloting this technology to make our panels more inclusive, we would like to thank you for your patience and would love your feedback as we work to increase bilingual accessibility for our audience and break down language barriers in real time. Now, I would like to pass it on to the moderator, Sarah Gallagher, Professor of Physics and Astronomy and Director, Institute for the Earth and Space Exploration, Western University, to take it from here. Thank you. Welcome, Professor, and over to you.
Thank you, Roshini. It is my pleasure to be here for this virtual event. I am joining you from the banks of the Deshkan-Zibi in London, Ontario, the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Lenape and Chinokton nations, on lands connected with the London Township and Sombre Treaties of 1796 and the Dish with One Spoon Covenant Wampum. Bonjour tout le monde, je suis vraiment content d'être ici aujourd'hui pour vous parler d'astronomie, de sciences mondiales, de collaboration et de la relation à long terme entre l'Afrique du Sud et le Canada. In June of 2024, I was thrilled to learn that Canada had joined the Square Kilometre Array Observatory, the SKAO, as the 10th full partner of the International Treaty Organization. This announcement was the culmination of decades of work. This work included extensive scientific planning, technical development, and many, many conversations and meetings and reports. This membership was built on a legacy of scientific and instrumentation excellence in Canada. The commitment to become a full member was matched with $269 million over 8 years, much of the investment going into industry, the National Research Council, and universities to build key components of the observatory and supply the human and computing resources needed for this great project. Joining the SKAO as a full member had been a consensus priority of the Canadian astronomy community, first articulated in the 2010 Long-Range Plan for Canadian Astronomy and reiterated in 2020. I started my term as president of the Canadian Astronomical Society shortly afterwards, and I can tell you that having joined the SKAO, already checked off on the list of priorities, was fantastic. So before we get started and I introduce our panelists, I want to take care of a little bit of housekeeping. So we will be taking questions through the Q&A feature and using the chat line only to communicate issues with the panelists or general comments. And I ask that instead of repeating questions, the audience upvotes a question they would like answered. We'll be taking questions from the audience towards the end of the panel. So it is now my great pleasure to introduce my colleagues on this panel to put this achievement in context. Why is it so exciting? What does it mean for Canada and South Africa? And how can we work together to make more amazing things happen? So you may not be very familiar with the Square Kilometre Array Observatory. And so I'm going to ask our panelists to help us understand why it's so exciting scientifically, how it came about, what it means for scientists in South Africa and Canada, and the history of the long-term scientific connection between our two countries. Our panelists today are Paul Dufour, who's the principal of Policy Works and senior fellow for the Institute for Science, Society, and Policy at the University of Ottawa. We have Lorado Baidu, a research associate of the Dunlop Institute for Astronomy and Astrophysics at the University of Toronto. Christine Speckens, professor, Department of Physics, Engineering, Physics, and Astronomy at Queen's University. And Luc Samar, who's the Director General of the National Research Council's Hertzberg Astronomy and Astrophysics Research Center. So I'm going to start with a question for Christine Speckens. As an astronomer who has been involved in the SKAO project for years, could you please explain the science potential of the project and let us know why you are so excited about Canada joining the SKAO and what is the role of South Africa as a site and as a partner? So let's hear it, Christine.
Great. Thanks, Sarah. I'm joining you from Kingston, Ontario on traditional Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee territory that's included in the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant. I'm really grateful to be able to live and work on these lands. And I'm excited to be able to tell you about the SKA. So let me do this visually, and I'll share my screen. Okay. I think you can see that screen now. And so the in a nutshell, the SKA is a global collaboration between 16 partner countries to build two telescopes, radio telescopes that will make up one observatory. And one of those two telescopes is located in South Africa, and that's the telescope that you're looking at now. To situate you on the continent, you can see the outline of the African continent on the top right-hand corner, and there's a white box that shows you where the telescope will be located. And the picture that we're looking at is one of the dishes that make up the array that will be the telescope. And that's what's in the foreground. And you can get a sense of its scale with the vehicles that are also in the foreground. And in the background are dishes associated with a telescope that's working now and doing some fantastic science called the Meerkat telescope. And that will ultimately be incorporated into the SKA to make it a tremendously powerful instrument. And the picture that we're looking at here is in the core of the array, which will stretch over 150 kilometers. And that spiral-like thing that you see in green on the right-hand side of this slide illustrates the scale and the geography of the different dishes. So each gray point in that map points to a dish that is like the one that we're looking at now. So this facility is under construction now. We'll get some of the very first data from this telescope towards the end of this decade, and it will have a lifetime well into the next decade. It will enable generations of astronomers to discover the universe. So the SKA is a mega science facility. It's one of the largest, it will be one of the largest radio telescopes in the world. It will do things like tell us about the extreme conditions of the universe, where stars and galaxies came from, how planets formed, as well as our place in the universe. So it's a tremendously exciting vehicle for discovery. And of course, the telescope that we're looking at now will be located in South Africa. And not only that, but the Canadian technical contribution to the SKA, the main one, will also be to the telescope that we're looking at now. So Canadians are contributing what's called the correlator. So it's the piece of supercomputing equipment that takes the signals from the individual antennas and turns them into maps of the sky. And so Canadians and South Africans are natural partners both within the SKA project, within the part of the SKA that will be in South Africa, as well as our natural scientific partnership that we'll get into later in this panel. So let me tell you why I'm so excited about the SKA. So I'm a researcher at Queen's University and I study galaxies. And so you may have seen this galaxy before if you've looked up in the night sky. So this is an astrophotography picture of the Milky Way, the diagonal band that you see in the sky. This is the galaxy in which we live, and every point of light that you see in this picture is a star in our own galaxy. And this is how the galaxy looks like when we look at it with our own eyes. So So the points of light that you see are stars, and the dark patches that you see is dust in the galaxy that prevents the light from behind it from reaching us. And we see that strip because the Milky Way has a disk in it, which is where the stars and the gas and planets like our own Earth are located. And so this is what we see when we look up in the sky with our eyes or with telescopes that look at optical wavelengths. And what gets me really excited about the SKA is to think about what it will see when it looks up to the Milky Way. And a really nice precursor of what that will look like was delivered by the Meerkat telescope. And so this is the heart of the Milky Way, and you can see a bit of a horizontal structure here. This is the disk of the Milky Way, but this is what it looks like in radio waves. And the colors here are telling us about different energies of light. And this picture looks totally different from what we see in the optical. The bright spot in the middle of this picture is the black hole that lives at the center of our galaxy. We see ring-like structures that are associated with stars that are forming or stars that have died. We see linear features that are probably related to gas that's being streamed by the magnetic field that's in the center of our Milky Way. And we see structures in this map that we don't yet understand. So there's a richness in the structure of the Milky Way and the view that we get of the universe by looking in radio waves as opposed to other wavelengths like the optical. And this is just a taste of what is yet to come with the SKA. The SKA will deliver a leap in our ability to map the universe, and that's going to allow us to discover regions like this in the universe, both nearby, like our own Milky Way, and out to the distant reaches of the cosmos. And that idea that we're going to be able to use the SKA to discover the universe is what gets me really excited about this facility.
Thank you so much, Christine. I think everybody is absolutely convinced that you are very excited and can understand part of the passion and the energy that the astronomy community brought to this project, because we are all thrilled, as I mentioned. So for my next question, I'd like to bring this one to Luc Simard. So, Luc, as the Director General of HAA, you were responsible for integrating the priorities of the astronomy community and nurturing the relationship between the SKA and Canada. Can you describe how that played out and put it in context with some other international astronomy projects that Canada participates in?
Thanks, Sarah. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm speaking to you from the ancestral and traditional territories of the Coast Salish people in Victoria on the West Coast. So very pleased to be here with you all. So the story of SK in Canada is a great story of science, technology, and people. And it started with a community, an astronomy and astrophysics community that is absolutely world class. And this community gets together every 10 years to plan the next 10 years through these long range plans. We've done 3 of those so far, 2000, 2010, and 2020. And all 3 LRPs, the SK was a top priority. And so this is a project that started quite a while ago. In fact, it started in the 90s with a lot of prototyping work, people trying to explore different concepts for the architecture of the observatory, and a lot of that work took place in Canada. In fact, Canada was a founding partner in the SKA. Then the partners created a company called the SKA organization to run a set of design consortia to look at different elements of the project. And so this took place mostly in the 2010s. Again, international consortia working together to design key elements of the observatory. After that consortium era, the IGO, the Intergovernmental Organization, was founded in 2021. And this is really a game changer for astronomy because what we have is 16 countries sitting around this big table and working together to bring about this global telescope. And, at a personal level, I want to say that it's a very humbling experience to be sitting with all these countries and working on such a great project. And so the IGO is on a scale that is very different from our other international observatories. And really, the government-to-government aspect of it is important to bring stability and certainty to a project that is quite complex and large. Because Canada has been involved from the beginning, we've been able to secure a meaningful share of observing time through key technical contributions. So, for example, Canada is designing and building the brain of the SKA, the digital signal processing system that will take the signals from all the dishes and combine them to produce the science data. And we're also delivering some amplifiers that are right at the focus of the telescopes to amplify the faint signals from the sky and then feed them down to the rest of the signal processing chain. And also, we are going to be hosting a so-called regional center, a big data processing system center where astronomers will be able to access the data, process it, and produce science from this complex data. And that's also going to be a game changer because it's on a scale that's never been done before. And it's also a global network of regional centers that will be contributing to the effort, to the production of SK science. And SK Science is coming soon. The first data will come, should arrive fairly soon. Soon in the scale of astronomy, this is just a few years from now, which is like tomorrow. And so this is a tremendously exciting time for everybody, and we can't wait to see what the science is going to look like. Thank you.
Thank you, Luke. So yes, I was mistaken. It was the 2000 long range plan where it first appeared. So you can see we had our eye on the prize and we stuck with it and it paid off in a fantastic manner. So now I want to turn to Lorado Baidu, who is an early career researcher here in Canada at Toronto's Dunlop Institute. And she was trained in South Africa. And now she's a postdoc here in Canada. And Lorado, I would love to hear about your experience as a student in South Africa and what does the SKAO mean for South African students?
Okay, thank you so much, Sarah. First of all, I would like to acknowledge the land in which I am. So I'm joining you from Toronto, and this is the traditional land territory of the Mississaugas of Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, and the Haudenosaunee, and also the Wendat people. It is covered by the Treaty 13 and is the home for many First Nations, the Inuit and the Métis communities today. So for me, coming from the background of being in the pipeline and being a beneficiary of the SKA, first of all, I just want to take the moment to just take back and bring some context into how I joined astronomy and also got to know the SKA. So it all started when I was in my first year at the university doing my undergrad, where a professor named by the name Tebe Medupi, who happens to be the first Black South African astronomer, came to join our university, Northwest University, to build an astronomy group there. So he became my physics lecturer. One day he actually called me to his office and told me about the SKA bursary and suggested that I apply. And at that point, honestly, I had no idea what the SKA was all about, nor did I even know what astronomy was even all about. And if I'm being real, my initial motivation was more financially. After my undergrad, I joined the National Astrophysics and Space Science program, which is run at the University of Cape Town to do my honors program. And even at that time, I was still funded by the SKA. And then I continued to do my master's also in astronomy at Rhodes University under the Center of Radio Astronomy Techniques and Technology, led by Professor Oleg Smirnov. And again, I was still funded by the SKA. And from there, I joined the SARAO, which is at the time it was the SKA South Africa, as an employee through their graduate program. So this actually allowed me to gain both work experience and while I still continue to pursue my PhD study. And for me, my PhD time, I actually spent it in the United States as an exchange student at the NRAO. So when I look back, what really stand out for me was that I was supported throughout the entire journey. And I've essentially been part of the SKA pipeline right from undergrad even up to now. And what does this mean to South African students? And again, I'll say from my perspective and also having seen a lot of South Africans that I know also go through the same pipeline. First of all, South Africa being the host country for the SKA This is really like the largest radio telescope in the world being built at our backyard. And this is really a fantastic thing happening to South Africa at this point. And also, you can see that earlier on, there was a clear intention from those who were part of organizing the SKA and also together with the government that they intentionally made it up that if the telescope is going to be built in the South African soil, then South Africans should indeed operate it. And you can really clearly see that evidence. And from that, they've been student funded across these many years. And up to since 2005, it's been recorded that the SARAO has funded over 1,700 bursaries. And this alone is mainly the SARAO. This is not including what the NASP has done and also through the government funding as well. So what stands out for me with this, you can see that it is not only about funding and getting people to get qualifications, but it's really about building people. Some individuals have really invested, and actually, even at the individual level, you find that in South Africa, especially from my own experience, I've really encountered um, good mentoring and also guidance throughout my career. I've really had been fortunate to have supervisors that have really guided me throughout my career. Like it seemed like from each level there was a supervisor who pushed me to the next level and etc. And that support really meant a lot. And I think without it, I'll probably not be here. And I'm not saying that that might be the story for everyone, but at least that really what worked out for me. But most importantly, what I want to highlight is that the SKA itself put structure in place to provide training through programs like the NAS winter schools. I've attended a lot of winter schools and workshops, astronomy workshops, data science workshops, and also conferences. And these alone, they provide us as South African students to really build ourselves. And even to add to it, it's not really just even about South African students, it's actually African students. Like if I remember in my office, I was probably the only South African at that time, and there were all kinds of African nationals, Nigeria, Ghana. So they are really building people. And one thing to note here quickly is that also outreach really forms a big picture when it comes to the SKA. They've really invested a lot on it. And also I have had an opportunity as a Black young South African woman to actually stand in front of students, including high schools, and tell them that I'm an astronomer. That alone, that moment alone, you might think that what is important is what I said, but it's actually what they saw. So for me, the SK is not just about a qualification, it's about access, mentorship, and expanding what students and people believe is possible. Thank you.
That was a fantastic summary, and it's so inspiring to hear about I mean, your growth, of course, as a scientist, and we're so lucky that you're here for this time in Canada right now, and also just the deliberate intentionality of building up the technical expertise, the human expertise, and especially from the ground level, looking at young people who, of course, when we're building these generational facilities, you have to always be thinking about future generations. So my fourth question is for Paul. So the SKAO is a global endeavor. It was years in the making, but the participation of South Africa and Canada individually and as partners has roots in a much, much longer history. How did South Africa get to this position of scientific leadership?
Bonjour tout le monde. Merci, Sarah. Great to be invited on this very special panel. Je dois reconnaître que je suis dans la région de l'Outaouais, qui est un territoire traditionnel des Anishinaabe. Et toute la question en passant de savoir traditionnel est un sujet très important pour notre partenariat avec l'Afrique du Sud et le Canada. So I just want to make the point, and we'll come back to this issue of why knowledge in its largest sense matters, and partnerships in knowledge is very important here in this particular context of our partnership with South Africa. Um, My background in this area goes somewhat back to 1993, 94. There was a certain election that led to the election of a very, very special person by the name of Nelson Mandela in South Africa. And when he came on board with his new cabinet, he had created a new Ministry of Science, Arts, Culture, and Technology. I'm emphasizing that because this is an issue that crosses this whole discussion that we're going to be having. It's more than just about science and technology. It's also about the arts and culture, traditional knowledge, etc. Um, so I was invited. I had the great pleasure of being invited to join South African colleagues in Cape Town to help create and develop South Africa's first national science and technology policy with the then new minister, first minister of this Ministry of Arts, Science, Culture, Technology, Ben Engelbani, who put together a team of 14 South Africans with 2 Canadians. I was one of them, um, with James Mullen, the IDRC, the International Development Research Center. IDRC had had a strong um, history of working in South Africa already, even before the Mandela administration came in. And we were asked to work together and develop a roadmap, if you will, a green paper to start with, a consultative paper to go out to South Africa citizens to say, where do you think we should be going with this leadership question that Sarah's asked? And where should we, what are our particular areas of, focus and so on. And it was a tremendous experience for me. I love South Africa. I've been back a number of times, of course. And more recently, in 2024, I was asked again by ISED, the Deputy Minister of the ADM, sorry, Assistant Deputy Minister, Nipin Vats, to prepare a kind of a forward look. What should our relationship now go towards with South Africa? Since 1993, we've been developing a whole series of projects ever since. And I was joined by a colleague of mine who was with me in 1994 in Cape Town, Michael Kahn from Stellenbosch University. And so we jointly with Dan Dutoit from the Department of Science, Technology, and Innovation in South Africa, we were asked to put together a forward look. What should this look like, and how should it grow further? And so I'm very that report, by the way, is available on the Global Affairs website or the ISED website. You can have a look at the scale and scope of what it is we examined. Of course, it looked at astronomy, space science, physics, but also, of course, other areas, molecular biology, the history of their vaccine development, which was also a very interesting area. And we also drew upon something called the SCUN, South Africa Canada Universities Network, which has been created, led in large part by Carleton University's David Hornsby and his South African colleague. And they've been working on creating a network amongst Canadian universities to strengthen that partnership that we have in research and innovation and science and technology. And it's moving forward with some support. It'll probably need a bit more support, but there's a lot going on there in terms of our, and you heard from Loreto, we've got lots of South African diaspora that are across our universities in Canada. So it's an important partnership. Astronomy and space sciences and mathematics, very important. By the way, there is such a thing called AIMS, the Africa Institute for Mathematical Sciences, which is a network of science mathematics institutes across South Africa that was developed and created with support from IDRC and others by Neil Turok, who is a physics superstar, who led the Perimeter Institute for Theoretic Physics for some time. So there's a lot of interesting linkages that exist between Canada and South Africa. I could go on. I do urge our colleagues here to who are signed in to have a look at that joint paper that I did with my great colleague Michael Kahn, and it does explore many partnerships that now exist. And the question now remains, what do we want to do with this, given the changing geopolitics and science diplomacy through large-scale infrastructure, such as SKA, is going to make a huge difference in growing our global partnerships rather than reducing them. I'll leave it at that. Merci beaucoup, Sarah.
Merci beaucoup. So that, I mean, that whole history is something that's really fantastic to see that this long-term relationship that extends, of course, beyond astronomy, and also just to hear about that very deliberate, conscious choice to make substantial investments by South Africa in science, culture, the arts, and technology. So thank you for sharing that, Paul. This is the first part of the audience participation time for our panel right now. So I'm going to invite Christine Speckens to show our poll question. We have a slide for our poll question, and this is so here is our question. It should show up as the Zoom poll should be launched pretty soon. So I'll just tell you the purpose of this. So here are 4 images. They're a mix of images, and you can see some of them are scientific, some of them are cultural, and some of them are linked to other types of exploration. And I want to ask, how many of these images do you recognize? Using the poll, you can choose more than one. And so I'll just give everyone a moment there to answer the poll question and look at these images. And so we'll let that go for a little bit. And part of the reason that we asked this poll question is because we're here as a group of most of us are astronomers, and we also have Paul joining us. So of course we think astronomy is fantastic and exciting and important. But I want to just highlight what the role of astronomy is in other forums as well. So where we have, and so that's part of what this poll question is intended to get at. So I think we'll have, if we can show the results of the poll, if that's appropriate now. There we go. Oh, it disappeared. So if you had a chance to glance at it, I think what you probably saw is that most people chose most of these images. So I want to thank the CSPC for supporting this on this poll and doing all the back end that makes this work so well. So the point of this, Christine, can you go to the next slide? So here's just captions that show you what the polls are. So of course we have Earthrise from Apollo 11, very famous, particularly top of mind with the recent flight of Artemis 2. The Pillars of Creation, which is taken by the Hubble Space Telescope and is inspiring and beautiful and moving, I think, for many people, not just astronomers. We have the image of a black hole taken with the Event Horizon Telescope. And for those of us who are old enough to remember the movie Contact with Jodie Foster in it in 1997, which was filmed at the National Radio Astronomy Observatory, parts of it in the United States. So I think we can put the slides down for right now. So we wanted to show this poll question just to highlight that astronomy is meaningful to a lot of people, and these images that are both scientific, coming out of space exploration, then coming out of popular culture, they resonate with a lot of people, and they're very familiar. So this is something to highlight what astronomy means to a lot of different people. So I'd like to return to Lorado. And with this context we have of where the SKA came from, what it took to get it to the place it is now, and where the people who are participating in it, where they came from and how they got to where they are. I want to ask you, Lorado, as a citizen of South Africa, what is your vision for what this global observatory could mean for your community? And what is your dream for the students who are going to be following in your footsteps?
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Thank you for allowing me to dream. So I'm going to take the opportunity to do just that. So for me, the SKA represents possibilities at scale, right? It is not just about building the world's, largest telescope. It's about what it actually enables people around it. And in South Africa, we see such evidence of just students being influenced by it, even communities as well, through these outreaches and etc. And my vision is that this continues to transform access, that students, no matter where they come from in South Africa, can actually see a clear path into science and also feel that they belong in that space. And my journey, including many others that I know, show exactly what's possible. But I also want to highlight that those journeys were not always guaranteed. They often depended on the right opportunities and the right people at the right time. Like I mentioned earlier on, was that I was just so fortunate enough to always have advisors that pushed me to the next season. I don't know whether that's the same story for others, but I know a couple that share the same experience as myself. So my dream then would be that the next generation doesn't have to rely on that kind of luck, but rather there will be a system in place that they can actually jump into. I want to see a system where the pipeline is not just also strong at the beginning, but it's also sustained throughout, where students are supported, mentored, and also given real opportunities to grow in this area into leaders as well. That means that we have to continue with this investment in training and also mentorship exposure and also to global science as well. So, and also because the SKA is a global observatory, I hope that it truly builds a global scientific community, one where South African students are not just participants, but are also leaders, collaborators, and also decision makers as well. And I believe that if we do that right, then the impact will go far beyond astronomy, but will also impact all spheres of life. And also, it will change how a generation sees itself and what they believe is possible. I think this one I like to drill it in because um, astronomy just really increases your mindset capacity. Because normally, when you come from a particular background, you don't think people think about the sky, right? But then you then realize that, oh, wow, literally people can sit down and think about how the universe began. Then that really just expands the way you think and process things and the possibilities that you see around you. Thank you.
That was very well said, and that's a good dream. And so, if we could give you space to dream, that it's a good day. I'm glad that happened. So I want to shift to asking Luke Samar. So we have this beautiful dream that Lorado has told us, but we can't just dream. We have to also think more practically as well. So Canadians might ask why we're investing so much money and resources into astronomy, which arguably I think is the most discovery based as opposed to applied science, at least on the superficial level. So what is the value of astronomy in building a big infrastructure like SKAO?
Thanks, Sarah. It's a wonderful question that we've had to answer multiple times on the way to securing the membership of Canada in the SKO. And it's multiple dimensions. It's science, technology, people, economic benefits, science diplomacy, and all those things combined provide a powerful rationale for a massive investment in technology and education, for example. And so if we look at just the technology, yes, astronomy is a fundamental science, but the technology that we develop for astronomy, because of the convergence of interest and requirements between, say, astronomy and industry leads to interesting application of our astronomy technology into everyday life. So the technology, for example, that we developed for SKAS found its way in communication systems between the ground and satellites. It's also found its way into quantum computers. And there are many, many other applications outside of astronomy, and that's something that those linkages should not be forgotten. But I wanted to focus on people, given what Lorado has told us about dreaming. I think it's really important. First and foremost, it's a generational investment into the next generation. It is basically astronomy has changed quite a bit over the last few years. It takes more than just astronomers to build something like the SKA. You need engineers, software developers, project coordinators, project managers, human resources, procurement, logistics, and everything. And all this expertise has to come together to produce something as complex as the SKA. So in terms of career options, astronomy is way more than, say, a tenure track position at a university. It offers a wide range of opportunities for a wide range of people, and that diversity is and the inclusivity of it all is a source of research excellence. When you put all this amazing talent together, great things happen, and that's how you're able to take on challenges that we were not able to take on before. And so I find that the project is particularly exciting because it's going to connect young Canadians, well, Canadians of all ages really, to their friends in other countries across the partnership, including South Africa. And those connections are what will be required to deliver this world-class observatory, but also do science with it, and also bring about the broader benefits that it promises. And so it's something that we should not lose track of. These broader benefits are an integral part of the reason why we've invested in this project. And I think, of course, it's going to teach us a lot about the universe, but I think it's going to teach us a lot about ourselves. And it's also, I think, going to generate, I think we have a picture of the Cosmic Echoes exhibit. One of the benefits is great art. Art is a deeply human activity. It's a beautiful way to show the links between sky, land, and people. It's a wonderful way to expose us to different worldviews, different paradigms. And shifting paradigms is how fundamental advances are made in science. And Indigenous artists are incredible at showing us their different worldviews and the connection between sky, land, and people. And so the SKO, as a partnership, put together a traveling exhibit called Cosmic Echoes. And so you can see some example of the great art. And this exhibit travels around the partnership, and we hope to bring it to Canada. But art and science are part of the same thing. They teach us about the place where we live, and I think they both really expand our understanding of the world that we live in. Thank you.
Thank you, Luke. And it is, yeah, I love that image, and I'm looking forward. I hope I get to see that exhibit. It looks like it must be fantastic. So I have another question for Paul. And you touched on this a little bit with what you talked before, specifically about the history with South Africa and Canada. But overall, how do you see big science projects as fitting within the landscape of international relations?
I would argue mucho importante. It's a very important dimension to growing our global network, growing our global connections, which, by the way, don't necessarily always immediately lead to scientific or research collaborations. Some of these things take a lot of time and patience to put them together. And so it's important to continue the support for these large-scale research infrastructure, we have an organization in Canada called the Canada Foundation for Innovation, and as well as the NRC, the National Research Council, which have been heavily involved in supporting large-scale research infrastructure. We've produced some Nobel laureates out of that, which is, always good to know. But we need to continue that relationship. By the way, Luc's comment about the art issue is fundamentally critical here when you look at what kind of inspiration for the next generation one can, drive. South Africa has you wouldn't necessarily obviously think about it, but South Africa has a very strong Arctic research program, and so do we. And we have a very interesting polar observatory in Cambridge Bay. And if you ever go to visit that, it's a global observatory, by the way. Therefore, visiting scientists, researchers, and so on can go there, but so can artists. And if you look at that facility, it's beautifully an architectural wonder how it's been designed to include, of course, indigenous art, indigenous knowledge. They're bringing in all kinds of potentials, youth groups, and so on, to learn more about and get inspired by the science, but the science and the art that goes behind it. So for me, that's a really interesting example of a partnership that continues to grow, but needs to continue to be supported, of course, because we do need these global collaborations to get past what we're seeing in some parts of the world of, difficult partnerships. Let's put it that way. So I would, echo what Luc was saying and the global issues and infrastructure. And last point, if I may, South Africa is very strong in science diplomacy. In fact, the capital of South Africa is now called the Science Diplomacy Capital. And they have a whole bunch of interesting programs that are trying to develop partnerships around the world through this network called INCSA, the International Network for Global Science Cooperation, which is chaired by Remy Quirion, Quebec's chief scientist. It's a very interesting partnership, and it's a growing one. So I'll leave it at that for now. Merci.
Thank you, Paul. Before you go, though, I just wanted to, we have another image that we wanted to share with the audience. Um, and uh, and this is, yeah, so can you speak to this image?
Yeah,
I
yeah. No, I wasn't there,
no,
but
I know, but
I
but what
know.
does this represent?
Yeah, this is the visit that was organized, I gather, by our friends in South Africa of science ministers, chief science advisors, and so on, in the G20, because South Africa hosted the G20 meeting last year. It had many elements to it, including this visit to the SKA. And Mona Nemer, the Canada's chief science advisor, was there, along with her. I think somebody else was with her and her staff. I think Sandy was there. But science was on that agenda. Astronomy was on that agenda. Partnerships globally with the G20 was on the agenda. And every time this group meets, the G20, they produce various statements that argue for and commit to certain research and science and innovation partnerships. So for those of you who have not seen the statement that was released at G20, there's one on this issue, and you can download it and look at what are commitments from Canada, but also what are commitments from these other countries in terms of science research and innovation. So thank you.
Thanks, Paul. So I have another question for you, Lorado, and you've talked on this a little bit, so don't feel that you have to repeat things that you've already said. But you mentioned the bursaries that really helped you get going. You also talked about the mentorship that you had from your professors, but then there was also that little bit of degree of luck that you credit with your scientific journey. And if you think more more about that system that you mentioned, that you would like to see the pan career system to develop talent within South Africa that could lead to scientific leadership. Do you have some specific ideas for supports that would help that out? Things that are missing that that you look at and think if that little piece were there, it would really be helpful.
Oh, wow. Um, I have to think a little bit about that, but I think when I said luck, it's mainly in between the two spaces, like moving from undergrad to honors and etc. However, as I mentioned, I actually got the SKA right from the beginning to the end. So in terms of funding itself, is really being able to apply for it and being aware that it exists and it's there. So I think for that one, there's no luck at all. And then in terms of in between the different seasons, then for that one it can take different shape for different people, as I did mention. But I think that for an opportunity like this where there's partnership, I can sort of see it being more structured, where more information is available. There's people are more aware of the available opportunities there, both internationally and also locally. So I think really at this point, it might be a more on the increased number of available opportunities and people being aware that these things exist as well.
Thank you, Lorado, for that perspective from one side of it. So now I want to turn to Christine and say, from your perspective as a researcher who manages funding for Canadian early career researchers, what do you see as the challenges and the gaps that would enable them to have stronger relationships with South Africa, and take advantage of the overall partnerships?
Yeah, so I think Lorado put it really beautifully, right? That the importance and value in mentorship, in allowing people to have the opportunity to study astronomy and then take that career either on in astronomy or oftentimes to other fields, and connecting students with opportunities, oftentimes opportunities that early career researchers have early in their careers really do sort of set the stage for their future careers as well as their future expertise. And so connecting early career researchers with opportunities is one of the big things that we use funding in Canada to do. And Lorado touched on the existence of frameworks that enable students from both Canada and South Africa to experience opportunities in different cultures, in the respective culture is tremendously important. And students need support to be able to do that. Things like how to navigate visiting, for example, South Africa from Canada or Canada from South Africa, navigating the process whereby that visit can be enabled, things like obtaining visas, little things like ensuring that organizers of those opportunities are aware that it takes time for those visas to come through. And so to allow people enough time to secure the necessary paperwork to be able to take advantage of those opportunities. And of course, the funding that backs those opportunities. It's expensive to travel, and it's not always necessary. But it turns out that going into a particular place and speaking directly and experiencing that different environment, either South Africa from Canada or Canada from South Africa, is tremendously important in both sharing expertise and learning from the local expertise, as well as understanding things like the SKA within its local context. And that allows for robust partnership building, but also excellent science to emerge. And all of that costs money. So things like enabling travel between the different between different sites, both for early career researchers, but also for their supervisors. Those kinds of opportunities, either through programs that exist or through programs that really tailor to the specific needs of both Canadians visiting South Africa and South Africans visiting Canada, are tremendously important. And that kind of funding is not something that naturally arises within the pool that a lot of us researchers have access to. So our funding, the funding that we have, doesn't allow for those kinds kinds of partnerships, particularly when they involve intercontinental partnerships. And then finally, I'll touch on something that Nick mentioned, and that's digital access. So enabling digital access to digital infrastructure, both for Canadians and South Africa and South Africans in Canada, can be tremendously important, particularly when the volume of the data that we're looking at is so large that we can't simply move it from one place to another, nor would it be sustainable to do so. And so enabling both physical access, but also virtual access and digital access to these beautiful data sets would be things that would enable researchers to have these experiences that would provide the mentorship that they need or that they want for their future careers.
Thank you, Christine. So that was a long laundry list. And I want to switch to Luke and say you spoke earlier about how it's different, this particular scientific collaboration, because of the formal governance structure that it's a part of. Could you just talk a little bit about what that actually means in terms of thinking about Lorato's dreams and what Christine would like to see enabled as well?
It's an excellent question. Well, first of all, I think that the IGO brings stability, long-term stability to a project like the SKA. So it's important that stability is not only important for construction, but also operation over decades. The mission lifetime for the observatory is 50 years. And that stability brings certainty that allows government and universities and all that to plan activities focused on the SKA and the opportunities that it offers. And so when different countries invest in something like the SKA, what you see is the communities in these countries focusing their attention and their resources to exploit the science and establish the necessary collaborations to produce that wonderful science. And then the IGO itself can also facilitate certain things like obtaining visa. And so because it's raising the profile of the project, not only within the astronomy community, but at all levels of government and beyond. And so I think the profile of the IGO, the stability, and all the bilateral agreements or multilateral agreements that are born out of that participation really helps overcome some of the challenges that Loreto and Christine spoke of.
Thank you, Luke. So I want to turn back to Paul right now. So you mentioned lots of different connections between South Africa and Canada, as well as lots of structures within both countries. When you hear about the challenges that both Christine and Lorato brought up, do you think everything is in place structurally to do all the things they want to do, or are there still some gaps?
Well, what can I say? There there are always gaps. I mean, these are large scale investments that we're talking about, and as Luca said, long term large scale investments. So, commitments for the long term, you need a very good foresight capability. By the way, South Africa has an interesting foresight program that allows them to sort of, you know, look out beyond, the current 10-year horizon, but beyond that, see what's coming on the horizon in a number of areas in technology, science, and so on. A lot what the LRP did, the long range astronomy plan did, or does. But yes, it needs support. Um, this current, I mentioned this current uh, SCUN network, the universities across country that are involved in both countries. They have some funding to help students, to help research. They need more support for, what it is they're trying to do, and also what Christine was saying about travel. It's not, South Africa is not next door, and also the issue of visas, which has been raised. We need to, sort out some of the issues associated with that as well. But ongoing support's important. We do fortunately have a Canada Foundation for Innovation whose job it is, among other things, to support large infrastructure across the country, and hopefully they will continue to get support. But you also need a larger strategy around these issues, I think, and that's something that that our governments, respective governments, need to pay a bit more attention to. I was very taken, by the way, by the president, South Africa's presidential PhD program that he's announced to try to encourage students from South Africa to go to different countries to work, do their research there, and to come back. That issue is also important. Loretta mentioned, that she's there. We're happy to have her. It's wonderful, but it's also a two-way street. We got to be able to learn from each other and not lose talent everywhere. We need to grow it in both places. And that presidential PhD program's been announced, an interesting model that one could look at a bit more carefully. Anyway, just some quick comments on that. And the last point, if I could make on the youth issue, which is critical, there are in this country, in Canada, a variety of science advocacy youth groups that are quite active in trying to influence governments, public policy officials, etc., on why it's important to support the next gen talent pool that we have. And in Canada, we have the Science Policy Exchange Group at McGill. We have the one in Ottawa, OSPM, the Ottawa Science Policy Network. These groups are growing, and I think South Africa also has a number of them. A message coming from that advocacy network to governments increasingly is important, because when it comes to astronomy, it's next gen that matters, right? I mean, I'm an old guy. I won't see all this stuff, but it's important to generate that passion. That passion, is such an important thing. I always say passion, is important, and patience is the passion of all great hearts. You got to have patience as well, and so these are important things. You got to encourage the next gen. Merci.
That patience for sure. I mean, as Luke mentioned, this was the SKA appeared first in the 2000 long range plan for Canadian astronomy, and it was formalized 24 years later. So I think that's another thing. Astronomers are very we're used to these big projects that take a long time, and also, of course, you have people who are putting blood, sweat, and tears into projects that may not actually be realized over the course of their career. So there are people who have been working on SKA. I mean, it was the same thing with the James Webb Space Telescope. There were people working on it who retired before or shortly after it finally launched because they saw their baby be realized. So it's absolutely something we have to do. And I think that connection between generations is so important. We have to pay it forward and think about, what we're doing right now so that the next generation has things to do. One thing that you mentioned, Paul, and I'm going to throw this out to the panelists just to see if anybody has any ideas, but the relationship between South Africa and Canada for a long time in astronomy is very well established. Both of us have a history, a legacy of scientific excellence, and places where really impressive infrastructure has been built. But then you also mentioned the Arctic as well. So there's certainly other research domains, I'm sure in oceans research as well, where there's a potential for partnership that crosses disciplines. So how do we enable that kind of a collaboration? So it's not just about the astronomers and maybe the engineers and the software engineers, but all different kinds of researchers, as well as cultural exchange. How do we make that sort of thing happen? So it's not just about a single project. Who wants to take that one on? Come on, Luke, help me out.
Absolutely, Sarah. I'm going to jump in.
All
One
right.
thing that I like to say that an observatory is an observatory, whether it's astronomy, ocean science, the atmosphere, or ecology. And so countries have established a number of observatories in different areas. They're all collecting, the difference is the sensors, really, but the way that you use them, the way that you store the data, the way that you then distribute the data to the science community is very much the same. And so I think observatories provide a way to bridge the gap between disciplines, and also I would say bridge the gap between these sometimes remote facilities and their user community. And so I think the collaboration between South Africa and Canada, as Paul mentioned, extends well beyond astronomy. There are meetings to discuss the broader collaborations in all different areas every year, and I think we should not lose sight of that.
Part of it is probably my ignorance about these other things that are going on. When we were discussing planning for the panel, and Paul told us about the South African Canadian University Network, Christine and I said we never heard of it before. So this is the sort of thing where it's nice to bring these existing structures and connections to the forefront so that we can all benefit in different communities from learning about that. So I just, let's see, we have a question from the audience, but I believe we are going to launch the poll for the CSPC. Would like to know who is here in the audience who's watching this panel. So I think they're going to launch the poll. If you can please, these are quick questions, so you can answer let the CSPC know, our hosts know, who has come to this panel. And we have a question in the Q&A that I'm going to put out to the panel, so I'll read it out loud. Do you have any advice for scientists in either South Africa or Canada for how to engage with governments about exciting science? So this is, I'll throw this out to the panel. This might be something I would say, Christine, as someone who advocated for the SKA to the Canadian government, how was that experience for you, and what did you find to be effective?
Yeah, thanks. So I think one of the most fun things about engaging with governments, our government about science, is actually telling them about the science. Sometimes in the process of sort of thinking about all of the different parts that are involved in a government commitment, the details of the science are lost. And so actually telling government people from the government about the science and why it's important scientifically, that's something that our long-range plan really emphasizes. But getting a chance to explain that in person and answer questions about the science is something that it excites me about this facility, and I think is often appreciated in my experience when I have connected with people in government. But then also being able to connect that science and it's the technology that enables that science with other sectors as well. And so really emphasizing that investments in science spill into many other sectors, economic sectors, technological sectors, innovation sectors, and that's been touched on in this panel as well. And so I think when I've engaged with government officials, those have been the topics that have come up, as well as what we've touched on today too, that the important broader impacts, this idea that science and technology go hand in hand, but they also go hand in hand with broader impacts, both at the locations of the telescope sites, as well as ensuring that scientific excellence is inclusive in Canada as well. And so those are things that I've tended to touch on when talking with government officials.
Can I just build on that, Sarah? Sorry.
Absolutely.
Real quick.
Please go.
What Christine just raised, connecting is an important word here. But you connect because if you're going to deal with government officials, government elected officials or so on, the most powerful thing you can do is tell stories. Storytelling on the impacts issue is probably the thing they can identify most with in their community, in their writings, in their, where they are, where they live, and tell a story that excites them about why this is important. And not not just about the science per se, but what's it going to do or can do for your community, your region, whatever it is, right, etc. So that's an important issue about storytelling to communicate out to thing. The other thing, by the way, that I was intrigued by what South Africa is doing with its South Africa astrotourism program. They're pushing the tourism aspect through the telescopes, right? And that's an important feature as well, right? How do you, use this incredible series of instruments that are being built there in remote areas, but also where there are communities that need to understand why they're being put there, etc. Why is this going to, and how is this going to impact on, the impact on tourism? If we're seeing this, for example, a good example is the Antarctic, where all of a sudden this huge, polar base, a lot of people have bases down there, including South Africa. Tourism now is growing, but that has impacts, negative and positive, right? Cruise ships going through and so on and so forth, and disturbing the environment, or the penguins. And so there's all kinds of interesting side effects to this issue. So it has to be thought through, but you have to have a strategy around how you communicate these things. And that's why I mentioned this, the science advocacy groups, the youth groups, because they have they can use digital, they can use, various other tools and so on.
Thank you, Paul. We have some more questions that are coming up in the Q&A and in the chat. So we have a question: how can developing countries participate and benefit from large scientific endeavors for which their resources do not allow financial collaborations? So I'll toss that out. Maybe there are some just some examples people know in which that is it's possible for people to collaborate, even if their countries don't have the resources, for example, to contribute a big piece of infrastructure. One thing I will mention, and while the panelists are pondering, is often in scientific collaborations, the contribution doesn't necessarily leave the country. It's often made as an in-kind, a contribution of hardware, but the money is frequently spent in the host country. So sometimes that makes it easier for countries to participate because they're reinvesting in their own community, industry, and universities. I don't know if there's anyone else who wanted to add to that, who knew of examples.
So I can add to that from the scientific side. Scientifically, there are elements of access to the SKA that are open to the global community. So the example right now is that the SKA supports science working groups across over a dozen different subfields. Membership in those science working groups is open, and it doesn't require any kind of financial investment, for example. And so for scientists who are looking to participate scientifically in the SKA, those opportunities to build collaborations through things like science working groups are open and accessible, and they don't cost any money, though they run fully virtually. When the SKA starts to take data, there is access to the SKA is proportional to member share, but there is a portion of the time that is expected to be open to the entire community, the global community. And after a proprietary period, is how astronomers would call it, after a period where members get preferential access to the data, those data become available to the global community. Studies from other facilities, other world facilities, like the NASA facilities, show that about half of the science that a facility does are from the members themselves, and the other half is through people accessing the data after the fact through an archive and doing new science with the data that's been taken. And so all of those opportunities don't have a dollar figure to them. And so that would be one way scientifically where researchers in countries that don't have access to resources to contribute to the SKA can participate.
Thank you, Christine. We have two questions. I'm going to kind of combine them, and I want to give Lorado an opportunity to answer first. So one is that what is the participation of other African countries in SKA? And then also, what is the role of the South African scholars in the SKA? So from your experience, Lorado, how are the other people in Africa, as well as the SKA researchers themselves, how are they participating in the observatory?
Okay, thank you. So your first question, please, was?
The first question was what other African countries are participating in SKA?
Okay. I'll just have to get the list properly, but I know that for example, Ghana participates, and like the ones that I know they have access to support, it's Ghana, Ethiopia, I believe Nigeria as well, because they get support. Um, uh, there's quite a number actually. I just cannot remember at the top of my head, but there's actually quite a number. I think for the details you can find them in the SKA what's this the SKA website. And if I get it before after my second question, I can post them on the chat as well. Namibia, okay, somebody said Namibia. Hey, thank you so much. Yes, please. And your second question, please.
Just from your experience, from your point of view, and we can follow up with that question. So Luke can follow up with that question with the more yeah, he's got the list at hand. So how are South African researchers specifically participating? So the question was specifically, so for Chile, for example, every telescope that's on Chilean land, the Chilean researchers get a fraction of the time. The SKA, as I understand it, is structured a little bit differently, but from your understanding, what is the participation of South African researchers in the SKA?
Okay, so I'll comment first on the Meerkat because that's what we currently have now, built, and that one is specifically um, open to South Africans to use it, and also African nationals as well, and anybody who can apply. But the priority is given to South Africans and African nationals. And for example, I know that during their first call for using the telescope, the first ever, I was able to apply as a master's as a yeah, PhD student, first year PhD student, and I got an opportunity to observe. And I know a lot of people who are already observing with the telescopes and are able with that telescope, and it'll only really um, um, be the same also for the SKF. Although the SKA now it sort of expands who has the more priority. It might not be to the extent in which we have the Meerkat, because now we share it with other countries as well. But in terms of what the South African scientists are able to contribute, at this point, we are already using the Meerkat extensively in different research groups. And so I believe that even the SKA, we are prepared to start working, applying for observation for that.
Thank you, Lorado. And just I want to follow up with that. You know, as an astronomer, I can say a Canadian astronomer, the fact that we have partnerships in global observatories means that people want to partner with us. So it's also a great way to build international collaborations because people really are excited about the new facilities you have. And of course, developing expertise in Meerkat means that all of those researchers who are already using those beautiful data are going to be extremely well positioned to when it levels up and becomes the full SKA observatory, to really, you know, they're ready. They have the tools. They understand how it works. They know what the great science is. So they're really well positioned to then take leadership when you take it to the next level. So I want to give.
Yes, and
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Lorado.
and
Finish.
also with the currently with the way the Make is set up as well is that even internationally, if you apply for the observe to look to observe, there's still that requirement to have some fraction of local people also participating in it, which also is there to really bridge that gap so that there's still some participation from people from Africa as well.
Thank you. Thanks for that clarification. Luke, did you want to round out the discussion about the participation of other African nations?
Yes, I just wanted to quickly add that we have 16 countries currently at the SKO table. The family will grow over time. There's already discussions with multiple countries around the world, including other countries in Africa. South Africa is taking the leadership on that, on developing those collaboration within Africa, and close support from the observatory. And of course, the interest is there's a scientific interest, human capital development interest. But one thing that's really interesting, Christine showed a picture of the distribution of antennas in the array at the site in South Africa. But you could think there will be multiple phases to the SKA. We're building phase one. Phase two will have a lot more dishes, and some of them will be spread out across Africa, hopefully. And so you could imagine at some point a telescope, synthesizing a telescope the size of Africa many, many years from now. So that's a very exciting prospect scientifically, as well as part of the human equation.
Can I just quickly build on that last point from Luc?
Yeah, go ahead.
So there's an array, there's a consortium, a network currently of science granting councils in Africa. They get together. It was triggered in large part by some support from IDRC. It's still ongoing, and they compare notes. All the granting councils that provide funding for researchers I forget what it is, about 15 agencies in different countries. And so they're a source for potential, contacts to see where things are going in terms of the potential, for partnerships or participation in other consortia and through the SKA or elsewhere, right? So it's a very interesting set of projects that are developing, the Pan-African science research community, right, is growing and getting much more developed in terms of its networks and therefore also funding.
Thank you, Paul. This is it's been really great to just get educated for myself about all of these great opportunities and the groundswell and of all of these different research collaborations that are happening globally and within Africa. So we're coming to the end of our panel. So I don't see any more questions. And so before I ask, I'm going to give each of the panelists 30 seconds for them to say their final closing remarks. But before they do that, I just want to thank the audience so much for listening and for contributing your great questions, and thank the CSPC for hosting us. So they are absolute pros at making these things happen and advertising them. And so all of the kerfluffle, that was just us. So all the good stuff definitely is them. And so as you can see there's other ways of signing up to find out about other events. So I really wanted to thank the CSPC. So now I'm going to go and ask the panelists. And so why don't we start with you, Luc? What are your closing 30 seconds of thoughts at the end of this panel?
I've had the wonderful opportunity to visit beautiful South Africa multiple times, talking to government officials, scientists, engineers, indigenous elders, and I'm tremendously excited by the promise of this wonderful partnership. The country shows vision and has accomplished amazing things in astronomy and beyond, and that's a great promise for the future.
Thank you, Luc. Very, very well said. How about you, Christine?
Sure. So I share Luc's tremendous excitement, and really I'm grateful to have also had the opportunity to visit South Africa. I was really I thought Lorado spoke beautifully, in particular, about the need for mentorship and opportunities in building these meaningful collaborations that allow us to discover the universe, and finding ways to support them, which are often that support that's needed is often relatively small in relation to the huge investments that are made to build these facilities, but they're incredibly important. And so finding a way, and based on what we've learned from this panel, to better support early career researchers so that they can go and discover the universe with the SKA is something I hope we get out of this panel.
Thank you, Christine. Paul.
Ditto. I do want to thank the panelists, by the way. I very much enjoyed uh, our dialogue, and I hope that the audience that was on board found it very helpful and useful. It's great to have a conversation like this. Um, about a part of the world that we sometimes don't really pay much attention to and should. I'm a huge fan, of course, of Africa and South Africa in particular, given the amount of work I did with my friends there. I do want to give a shout out to our South African colleagues who may be listening. And I know our partnership will continue to grow. We have this MOU, this Memorandum of Understanding between Canada and South Africa in science, technology, and innovation. That memorandum is into its 6th year, and we have an opportunity here to grow it, but also to grow it in a larger context of other issues that I mentioned, including large-scale infrastructure, but also, of course, the science diplomacy aspects, the youth the mentorship issues, and so on. So thank you again for the opportunity and privilege to be on this panel. It's been wonderful, and let's go.
Thank you, Paul. So that was very eloquent. Lorado, I want to give you the last word. You're our, you're our future, and so you get to send us off.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much. Also, I share the same sentiments. I'm just so thankful to be part of this panel. I see myself as a baby here, so I'm really learning a lot, getting to see, the amount of work that has already been put in place and, making it possible for people, younger people coming up to really experience and be part of, science. So I just want to say I'm just so very thankful. And also just to iterate that to some people, SK might only mean a telescope in science, but to other people like myself, it represents, you know, much greater investment above science alone. It's a life change, right? And also South Africa, it has already shown that with the right support, South Africans are capable and they are ready to become scientists who will contribute globally as well. So really, I'm looking forward to this partnership, and I know that it's really meant to for us to really just put things structure in place so that others will just come and enjoy it without having to feel lucky, but that they actually belong to the science community. And I believe if we get that right, science will really contribute not just, with a science world leading facility, but it'll also just build a group of scientists who are there to take leadership. And also engineers, as we've been learning today, as well as software developers. So it contributes far greater than just looking into the sky. It produces people who will think big, people who will see possibilities into whether it's data science, whatever spheres we find ourselves in. I believe that it's really producing people who will impact their own surroundings, cities, and the world as well. Thank you.
Wow. Well, I really have nothing to add. So Luke, Paul, Christine, and Lorado, thank you so much for your contributions. It's been really fun getting to know you all better and having this conversation. So thank you so much, and thank you to the CSPC. And bonne journée tout le monde. And I will see you around. Thank you.
Bonjour.
Au revoir.
Thank
Au
you.
revoir. Take care. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye bye.